guys, and welcome back to my ASMR channel. Today I'm going to be peacefully reading you the second chapter of the Rise of the Aurora, the book I wrote by myself. So I hope you guys enjoy and you can feel more relaxed with the second chapter of my book. And we'll just get going. So, we just read chapter 1, The Awakening. So, next, I'm going to be reading you chapter 2, Children of Glade. I woke with a start. Someone seemed to be calling me. River, wake up, River. I peered my head out the window. They signaled for me to go meet them. I walked down the ladder and went out the door. Hey, River, did you hear about their shop today? They're selling a slingshot. For real slingshot, Liam exclaimed. I wonder how powerful it is, Isaac shouted back. Liam, if you and Isaac want to buy it, just get it at my parents' shop, Sarah told them. You think I just have rupees lying around all the time? There's no way I could afford that thing, Liam yelled. Suddenly, I watched as his foot slipped, and he fell onto his face. Rupees dropped out of his pocket, and we all gasped in shock. Where'd you get those? Sarah yelled. Liam stood up and shook the dirt off his pants, meanwhile picking up all the rupees that he had spilled. I watched in shock as Sarah slapped his hand, and they all fell to the ground again. Were you stealing from my parents' shop again? We told you that you weren't welcome in the town anymore if you did. Liam placed his hands behind his back. I'm sorry, Sarah, he exclaimed. Tears started to leak down his face, and he ran into the woods. Now look what you've done, Isaac shouted at Sarah. I looked down in sadness and gazed towards the woods when I was surprised to see Sarah run in. Where are you going? Isaac shouted as he followed her. Things were getting worse by the second. I had to warn someone. I watched as the small boy, Cassidy, ran up to me. I saw the whole thing. Quick, we have to warn George. Cassidy grabbed my hand and pulled me back into the town beside the lake where George stood. Cassidy tried to catch his breath. All the kids ran into the woods. George's nice and heartwarming expression quickly turned into a frown. Quick, River, come inside. I followed George into the house that stood next to the lake, and he motioned for me to open a metal chest that stood in the room. I was going to wait until I thought you were ready, but at a time like this, I feel it is necessary for you to open it. Go on, hurry. I frantically lifted the lid open to find a wooden sword in the chest. I've been saving this for you for quite some time, and I was planning to give it to you if you agreed to deliver the package to the royal family. But now it seems we have bigger problems. I hesitated to take the beautifully crafted wooden sword, but I hadn't a choice in the matter. The kids were in danger. The people of the town had told me many stories of the treacherous things that lay within the trees, and they were way too young to be facing whatever lay within the glade. I picked up the sword and headed towards the woods. As I came outside my home, I noticed Raven was standing outside the entrance with Lily. You expect me to just give Raven to you, don't you? Well, no. She was limping earlier as you strangely left her outside, and I noticed her foot had been wounded. Probably all that hurting the goats hurt her. How could you, River? Well, I took her to the spring, so she's fine now, but until you've learned to respect her, there's no way I'm giving Raven to you. I watched in sadness as Lily turned around with Raven to leave through the woods, when Raven nicked in disapproval. What's wrong, Raven? Lily asked. Lily pulled on the reins from the ground, but she refused to move and nudged herself against me. I guess you still prefer your owner over me, huh? Well, if you're going to take her, make sure to be more careful next time, she told me. Lily crossed her arms and headed through the path down into the village. I had never seen her like that before. Usually she was kind-hearted and never liked to argue, but around Raven she acted like a totally different person. I stroked Raven's mane, saddened how I hadn't been as careful as I should have been. But even through the hardships, it seemed Raven still had a strong love for me as I did her. Yeah, I yelled, as me and Raven rode into the woods. The long, tall birch trees surrounded the area. I could not see above the tops of the trees. They covered the sky with leaves. I witnessed a bridge not far off, but when I came up to it, Raven was going so fast that she broke one of the floorboards. She got scared, and I fell off her back. I tried to signal for her to come back, but she just, ran off. I had no choice but to continue on foot. I jumped past the missing piece of bridge and ran as fast as I could deeper into the woods. As I arrived deeper into the part of the glade, I had a feeling I was getting closer and closer to the kids. The grass grew longer, and there were more and more trees the farther I got through the woods. I looked around, and I saw a strange cave. I thought it may have been where the kids had ended up, so I decided to go in. I unsheathed my sword and prepared for the dangers that were to come. I went to the cave and peered inside. It was very dark, and there were bats floating around. Ah! I shouted. A strange piranha-type plant bit me, and I fell back. I was stunned for a few moments in shock. I tried to force myself up, but I was too hurt. Hey, you! Are you alright? A strange man came up to me and helped me up. I fell down again, but I just couldn't stay awake. Then everything went dark. And a while later, I woke up on the forest floor, on a soggy pile of leaves. I scooched back from the same man I had seen earlier. I was frightened. Hey, it's alright. I won't hurt you. In fact, I just dragged you away from those monsters that, if you hadn't moved, you might have died. Those nasty piranhas drain the life out of you. Don't go near those things without being properly prepared first. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. The name is Birdie, but people just call me Birdie. The man, Birdie, was a bit shorter than me. He had brown hair which he seemed to carry a bird's nest on the top of. I spent the last half hour preparing this soup for you. You should feel better in no time at all. He handed me the soap, which I sipped delightfully. I nodded, signaling, "Thank you. I have a little something here that might help you on your travels. I keep a pot of lantern oil here for travelers like you. It seemed from here you were heading in the direction of that cave, were you not? This will light a lantern, but make sure not to have your lantern lit unless you're using it. This stuff might run out fast if you use it all up. What say you? Do you carry a lantern with you?" I shook my head no. "Oh, you should come more prepared in the future. This is the only one I have, so take good care of it, okay?" I slowly stood up and took the lantern. I figured if I was going into that dark cave, I would need it. I took out an empty bottle from my pocket and filled it up with lantern oil. "Safe travels," Bertie shouted back. I smiled and waved. I arrived at the cave once more. I had remembered those monsters were vicious, so I took out my lantern and sword. I shone the light at them as I slithered up and got ready to attack. Yeah, I did a vertical slice at both of them and killed them in one strike. They exploded and disappeared. It was funny how I had no idea I was capable of being handy with a sword, but it seemed to just work fine for me. I entered deeper into the cave to find Liam's wooden sword I had often seen him using laying on the ground. I knew I was getting close. I just knew it. Sorry. As I went through the cave, a few lamps stood on the edges of the rock. I lit them so it would be easier to see. Eek! I screamed. Bats started charging for me. Instead of running away, I quickly sliced the bats to smithereens. I took a few deep breaths, then moved forward. A gigantic cobweb blocked my path. It must have been made by some sort of spider. I tried to run through it several times, but I just kept bouncing back onto the ground. I looked around frantically for clues, but there was no sign of anything that would help me. I stepped closer and shone a light on the cobweb to get a better look at it. It caught on fire, and I slipped back in fright. I thought I was a goner, but the cobweb vanished and I could pass. I ran as fast as I could through the tunnel, batting at various enemies and collecting rupees along the way. I finally reached the end of the cave and stepped into the light. I came across a misty clearing with trees lining the ground. I stepped up onto a wooden platform and had a good look around. There were several small hills and grass surrounding most of the area. Much to my surprise, I noticed Liam was huddled up in a ball with Sarah leaning over him as she started to speak. "I'm sorry, Liam. I had no idea what your family was going through. If I had known, I would have just given you the rupees willingly. It wasn't fair of me to get so upset at you. I'm sorry." Liam placed his head on Sarah's chest as water leaked from his eyes. Thank you, Sarah," he said. I tried to back up quietly when I loudly stepped on a twig and it made a loud crunching sound. This caused Sarah and Liam both alarm as I stood up abruptly to look at me. "Oh, it's you, River. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have run away. Can we go back now?" I smiled and took both their hands as we walked back to the village. Alright, that was chapter 2. I hope you all enjoyed. For more updates and alarms for my live streams and just to be connected with me as part of my channel, would you please subscribe and like my videos? And I hope you enjoyed and you feel a little bit more relaxed now. And do you like chapter 2 of my book? And I will hopefully see you next time.